Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I am your host, Douglas Gabriel, also known as Thomas Paine in The Ass of the Globalists, because I like to put tax on the seats of the globalists, like we used to do in school, just to wake them up and don't let them sit down, don't let them get too comfortable. Today, I'm talking with Michael McKibben about spying. And Michael, I used to be a spy, but you're not a spy, are you?
No,
Oh, well, that's
never.
good. Well, then one of us isn't a spy. But today we're going to talk about spying because you have created the most amazing amazing view into British spydom and the way that that came over to America and basically infiltrated our system so much that, in essence, if you basically say you're a spy in America, that means that you have national security clearance, a top secret security clearance with national security ability to never tell anybody what you do. In other words, you are the highest person in the American pantheon of intelligence gods. And I want to talk today, at some point, about the history of the way spying came about, because what we're talking about here is when war was invented, first there had to be spies. And that's the problem. So going underneath the auspices of national security doesn't cut the mustard for me anymore. I don't care. We heard Clapper's a spy, Brennan's a spy, Comey was a spy, Andrew McCabe's a spy, William Priestup's a spy, Joseph Smith's a spy. So these are all spies. And when you say spy, what you are saying is subversion, infiltration, lies, cheating, deceit, deception. Every bad word you can think of has to be tacked on to what a spy is. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, but you're going to talk about the history of it, and I'm just going to get all upset because I used to be a spy in the National Security Agency, and I spied on Russia and China and other places. And when I signed a security agreement, you know what it said? Let me tell you what the security agreement, that is a military security agreement. That is not the one that Hillary signed. She probably didn't sign any of them. That's not the one Imran Awan signed or the one most of these corporate intelligence people sign. When you sign a military security agreement, right up front it states that you admit that you are committing a crime. Correct. Think that through. And that's what I'm always saying, and that's the a priori
What do you
assumption.
mean that you admit you're committing a criminal act by signing the agreement? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Is
yes,
that what you're
first
saying?
off, 'cause the agreement is a conspiracy to commit a crime, but everything I did as electronic warfare is what we called it in those days. Every speck of electronic warfare I did was illegal. It was a crime. It was a war crime because the Geneva Convention says you cannot spy on anyone but your enemy. And we were in a
Oh,
Cold
that's a nice
War.
foundation for a moral culture, isn't it?
Well, you have found the very documents that show that that has been completely abnegated. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So this isn't just me again. This is a lot of people, but and we're still doing a lot of reading now. Now that we know what we're looking for, or think we do, the information's out there in spades related to the spy culture that exists around the world. And what we focused on earlier was the genesis of the modern day spying that really occurred after wireless technology was invented. And what we started observing is the way the British government very quickly moved in to take control over every aspect of human communication related to wireless technology, which would be radio, TV, and now internet. And when we say wireless, I think we also need to talk about wired technology, because there's this whole system of cabling all over the planet, which companies like the British company Global Crossing manage. So, and then we've got satellite as well. So we've got a lot of different aspects of this. So the question really emerged in terms of our interest in what these people were doing when we discovered how completely controlled our judiciary system was, as well as our legal system and the patent office, in ensuring that once our technology, our invention of social networking, was known to them, how quickly they circled the wagons to make sure that we never benefited from our invention, but they did. And so what, at first you're kind of in disbelief. No, it can't be that bad. But then as we have begun peeling away the layers of this onion, it is that bad and worse. And so what we've had people this weekend doing is reading through a lot of the foundation documents for how modern-day spying was developed following on the developments at Bletchley House in the UK, which we all know from the propaganda that's out there was where the Enigma code, the German encryption system, was allegedly cracked. And I say allegedly now because what we're really learning is that the things we think are true in history, especially related to government development, may or may not be true. And so, who knows exactly what happened at Bletchley House? We know what the propaganda is, but we're not sure, because what we're seeing is that anyone associated with Bletchley House, following from the war, became knighted, became a sir, was completely absorbed by the Queen's Privy Council. And so what we know as the history sounds very romantic, and how the war was saved, the Western world was saved by this supposed breaking of the German encryption. And that may or may not be true. I tend to believe it probably is true. From the standpoint of I believe that they did focus on the breaking of the encryption Enigma machine, but I think the larger story of the developments at Bletchley House really deal with how global corporatism and banking that was associated with the Bank of England, and the development, the continuing development and circling of the globe by the British Empire, really focused on taking control of encryption and electronic communications for the continued manifestation of the 200-year Cecil Rhodes Plan for Anglo-American superiority around the planet. I really think that's what the Enigma story was really all about. It really wasn't about that. It was about their continuing consolidation of power.
Without a doubt. And you used the key word, war. There is no intelligence needed except for war. When you don't like your neighbor, you want to secretly find out what they're up to so that you can do them in, or make sure that they don't do you in because you fear them. Well, what is that? Where does that actually come from? And you've pointed this out again and again. As soon as you said it's war in Britain, you got to do anything. You could propagandize, you could be the British East India Company and have your spies going out to the rest of the world, basically trying to fight off the first corporations. The Dutch East India Company, the British East India Company were really fighting the German Hanseatic League. And what were they doing it with? Spies and intelligence. And when you say spies and intelligence, again, I have to keep emphasizing, you cannot say intelligence without counterintelligence. If you're going to hear that somebody's going to do you in, you're going to create a really subversive plan to try to stop that. You're going to lie, cheat, do anything you can, kill, whatever. And why is that okay? Why is it okay that under the auspices of war, we can spy, we can have counterintelligence, we can do every despicable, horrible, immoral thing because it's under the auspices of war? And as we've shown so many times, war is connected to bankers. And in a minute, I'm going to give you kind of a sweeping big history of it. But the British, as you've pointed out, it was 1914, wasn't it? Marconi, the wireless, cut the wire
Yeah,
to Germany.
that was the deal, that the monopoly deal that the British Parliament cut with the Marconi company. That, by the way, two of the MPs in England invested in through their American subsidiary. So the whole Marconi stock scandal is well known now. If you Google it, Marconi stock scandal, you can read about it. But a future Prime Minister of England, Lloyd George, was one of the culprits. He ended up apologizing for it, but I guess that's all you need to do is just apologize. Oh, gee, I got caught. And so Marconi, the development of wireless, the development of encryption for signals in wireless technology, the confusion of that with the Tavistock Institute and the British Psychological Society. I mean, the entire development of modern communication was really controlled by the Privy Council in England, and it has never not been. That's the thing we're seeing. Has never not been controlled by the Privy Council. But here's an interesting development, Douglas. There's lots of ways we can go in this conversation. But one of the things that occurred at the end of World War II is that General Marshall was put in charge of deciding how intelligence would be shared after the war. And specifically, he said on item G, number one, item G, that OSS, Treasury, and FCC will be excluded entirely from cryptanalysis activities. The OSS, which became the CIA, the Treasury Department, and the FCC would be excluded from having this information. Now, isn't that interesting? Because this organization that was developed out of this activity became what we now call two things: GCHQ, the General Communications Headquarters in the UK, and the NSA. Those were the organizations that emerged out of this activity. And they specifically directed that the OSS, which became the CIA, and the Treasury Department, the money guys, and the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, would specifically be excluded from being involved in this activity. There is the genesis of this tension between the CIA and the NSA.
You nailed that.
These generals knew what the OSS was doing. This was the stay-behind units. This was the SOE. This was the, there's another acronym they used, SIS. These were the stay-behind espionage units that were deployed all over the planet that were still there. And these generals knew that. And these generals, I am sure, I can hear their thinking, we're not going to empower these bad boys around the planet with this information so that they can exploit it against the citizens of the world. Now, Marshall directed that, but that's not what happened. What we're seeing in the evolution of these minutes of these meetings, and these are very interesting, now that we know what we're looking for, we're seeing a very clever manipulation by the Privy Council, by the British side of this organization, to figure out a way to make sure that their OSS, their SOE backdoors, their stay-behind networks would get this information. And bottom line, let me bottom line it for you. They got this information from GCHQ, from the British, because the CIA was specifically excluded from getting it from the NSA. Boom, there you go.
And
it has not changed to this day.
No, it has not. And the war we have highlighted for the last few years is going on between the NSA and the CIA, and we have shown how that has played out. And
the CIA again is getting their information from the British, not from the NSA. Unbelievable.
And the CIA has a international global rogue network centered at CERN in Switzerland, which, of course, strong British influence because, well, I'm not going to go into all that. But the point is that the CIA, the NSA, that's the reason for these fake whistleblower dumps of information, whether it's Vault 7, Snowden, anyone you want to mention, go back, look closely, look at Snowden. It's not a plausible story. These are the effects of the war between the CIA and the NSA. Now, the NSA collects intelligence. And so here is the problem. The NSA stays at home with kind of like the government, and they collect the intelligence and control it. But there are agents out in the field. That's your CIA. And later, all CIA agents that are really bad become rogue CIA because they see where the flow of money is, and they simply go and collect the money, like a Peter Strzok's family or anybody else you want to mention from the CIA. It's usually a dynasty of family affair that knows exactly where the bodies are buried in foreign countries. So they're the Wild Bill Donovan. When the OSS turned into the CIA, Wild Bill Donovan and his group had found the German gold and the Japanese gold that was buried part of it was buried and put in caves in the Philippines. So the CIA immediately started with rogue CIA members who said, "Oh, no, we're not giving you all this gold. We found it. We're keeping it." They found, on the island, they found 14 different caches that we know of this gold. No one knows actually the total of the gold. That gold has always been used for the CIA. The NSA has been tracking all their intelligence, so they knew this was the case, and they followed them through their banks, and they were busting them at CERN, and they were letting out the news that the NSA, the CIA's rogue headquarters was at CERN, and the NSA in the last 10 years has gone into an absolute war with the CIA. They are not friends.
Let me point out in the same page, this is a one-page document that was really the directive for what became the current version of GCHQ and NSA. There's another two really interesting elements of this. One was a directive that the Chinese would continue to participate with them in the sharing of intelligence through something called the SACO Agreement, which was the Sino-American Cooperative Agreement in July 4th of 1943. And essentially 4 years later, the Chinese communists started in China. And it was out of basically the delegation of the Sino-American Agreement to the CIA through the back door. And then the other one was the limited involvement of the FBI directive. It said that agreements between Army and Navy concerning exchange and dissemination of intelligence remain in effect until merger is effectuated, that cryptanalytic activities of the Federal Bureau of Investigation be limited to criminal activities in the U.S. and its possessions. So here we have the document that really defined how the world looks to us to this day. And there's a lot of documents that we can see where they refined these basic directives. But here we have the criminal developments out of probably what was well-meaning at the time. What are we going to do now that the war's over? And what we now see is this is when the bankers and the corrupt spies moved in to take over the exploitation of governments, the UK government and the US government and the UK's Commonwealth governments, and the use of those governments as the cover for the entire shadow government deep state around the planet. Wow.
And to underscore what you're saying, the Brits, when you say China, you say Brits. When you say Israel, you say Brits. So the Five Eyes with the Brits also has always included the sixth eye, Israel, and the seventh eye we never, ever admit, which is China. That's the reason China got a courtesy copy of every one of Hillary's emails. Now let's go to the topical nature of what you are describing here, and that I'm going to give an example. The war between the NSA and the CIA, the war between the intelligence group centered in the government and the rogue agent spies out in the field, is exactly personified in the fact that Brennan went to not his counterpart, John Brennan, the head of the CIA, went to Robert Hannigan, the head of the GCHQ, and asked him to come over to go to Fort Meade, Maryland, which is the head of NSA, and secretly, without Admiral Rogers, the head of the NSA's permission, knowledge, or anything,
there you go,
wiretap Trump Towers.
That shows the CIA gets their data from GCHQ. This is treason.
It's treason. It's been going on a long time, and it's so deep that no one is even willing to sit down and listen to how bad it really is.
Well, these documents were not released until April of 2010. We have not known about these agreements our whole lives. Now we know them. We can read them. We can see what has developed over the years, the decades from the 40s. But this really goes back to 1919, because this is when 1919 is when GCHQ was created, and this was basically in the aftermath of World War I, where they were consolidating their control of propaganda through the wireless technologies of the world, and the British were going to make sure that they ran it all. They weren't giving any of this to the U.S.
Correct.
They have run it from the back seat, where we thought we were in control, but in fact the Privy Council was in control the whole time.
Yeah, let me break this down for people. Okay, here in America, every single federal agency connected to the executive, which is all military, all intelligence, all 17, basically everything. Okay, if it is not connected to the Congress or the judiciary, the Supreme Court, it is under the direct command of our commander-in-chief. Now, He is our warrior. He's supposed to protect our borders, and that's the reason it's treason that they won't give him the money to protect the borders. He's supposed to stop foreign agents, what we call globalists, from infiltrating our country. We know that it's already happened so deeply. He's supposed to protect us in trade wars. He's supposed to protect our economy from being attacked. So he has to have intel. Now, more than half of the intel in America for the federal government is corporate. And you can't trust any of those people. They're all crooked. They're all criminal. Trust me. Every single one of them. That's where Clapper went to work. That's where Brennan went to work. That's where Mueller works. That's where Comey worked. That's where they all work. Corporate intelligence. That does not serve the president. At this point, it serves globalists, and they're basically not intel. They are a false flag of intel, and they are actually counterintelligence that is being directed by the British monarchy. Or call it what you want, the United Kingdom. Doesn't matter what you call it, Five Eyes. It doesn't matter. The point is not America. It is not our Constitution. So the battle is between, and this is a clear distinction that must be made that people cannot comprehend, because they do not know that the British system was built into our system, and that a form of landed gentry was created called this SES, Senior Executive Service. They can't be fired. They're paid more than everybody else. They can do anything they want.
They were protected completely in all of the Trump-Russia investigation. SES names were redacted 100% by Congress, and nobody in Congress, this is the interesting thing, not a single person in Congress spoke up and said, why are you redacting the SES? They just assumed it was okay that they could. Isn't that amazing?
Now, let's make this clear distinction so that simple people like me, and someone laughed the other day when I said I'm a hillbilly from the Ozarks. They thought I was insulting hillbillies from the Ozarks. I am a hillbilly from the Ozarks. I want to make that perfectly clear.
I confirmed that.
You know it well. You know me well. And you know that I am a very simple person. I just get upset about things. And here's the deal I'm upset about today. We don't need any counterintelligence in America, period. It is globalism. It is against the executive. We have seen that those are the treasonous son of turkeys that do this. Where does it come from? The CIA has to be thrown out. The CIA Counterintelligence Department, that's double worse. They have to be burnt at the stake, or whatever you want to do to those treasonous pigs. Then you have to stop the FBI Counterintelligence Department. There can't be a counterintelligence department. The FBI is law enforcement. It isn't supposed to be a spy. It isn't supposed to be going out of our country and attacking people.
Can I stop you a minute?
All right.
Because the question is, how did we get to the point where these corporate intelligence players have all this power? Well, we now know that in 1993, Chandler and Larry Summers and all these organizations, they began developing this concept of public-private partnerships, where, well, we in the government can't really do the job as well. We're going to give it away to private companies. And that is essentially what they used the 90s and the early 2000s to perfect, was how are we going to rewrite our laws to allow corporations to begin providing these services to our intelligence agencies. And that's what primarily Clinton started in earnest. So by the late 1990s, when we were coming along with our invention, they had already perfected all this policy creations within. They allowed policy within the agencies to derive our laws instead of our laws, and so they essentially allowed public-private partnerships where basically fascist companies could provide services to our organizations, to our agencies, and this is where they allowed Serco in. They allowed Serco to provide some of these. So Serco, the creation in Britain, Sir Geoffrey Patty came to the U.S., created subsidiaries in the U.S., and then they allowed Serco to begin fulfilling contracts through our GSA to provide Navy intelligence, FBI intelligence, various agencies. They could provide that technology through these private companies. And then, of course, then we had the development of the In-Q-Tel in 1999 that allowed the CIA to fund private agencies in Silicon Valley to provide the technology to these private companies. So there we have the back door. This is how the CIA got control of everything, and they basically did an end run on the NSA. And in late 2001, right at the time when they were forming the Eclipse Foundation, we hear from William Binney that he saw very clearly, and he said it in his own words, the CIA, the NSA's gone rogue, because basically they were co-opted by the CIA. And there we have how GCHQ took over American intelligence. Boom.
Absolutely.
GCHQ, the Privy Council, took over American intelligence through public-private partnerships run by the companies like IBM in the Silicon Valley and foreign companies like SAP in Germany, and a huge number of British and French companies. So they gave out all these public-private, quote, partnerships, which were basically how fascism took over not only American technology, but also American intelligence, and all run by the Privy Council. It's amazing at how intricate this set of treasonous relationships is.
And you and I could go on all day about the crypto keys, the Federal Bridge Certification Authority, and the fact that now it's gone to individuals, not just corporations. These are literally oligarchs, Hillary Clinton, Robert Mueller. But anyway, going back, please remember, anything with the word counterintelligence in it has nothing to do with supporting our Constitution. It is illegal, it is unfounded, it is wrong, and it should be closed down, and everyone involved in it that didn't turn them in for treason needs to be prosecuted for treason. This is how this has happened.
Not counterintelligence, counter-constitution.
That exactly is what it is. Now, intel is supposed to feed the president so he can make high-level decisions. Counterintelligence that never comes to the knowledge or consciousness of the president, which is what the entire Crossfire Hurricane was, as well as the supposed investigation for obstruction of justice, those things were against the president. They were all out of the following offices: the CIA Counterintelligence Division, the FBI Counterintelligence Division, the the Department of Justice National Security Division, and the Weaponized State Department, the part that literally somehow became the number one intel informer of the president, and a new position was created. And that position was the person who had to deliver the status of weapons of mass destruction to the president every single morning. And so the intel that Obama received for all those years, he didn't get from any intelligence community. He got it from the State Department, from Leslie, whatever her name was. I used to talk about her all the time because she had so much power in her hands. She alone would come and tell the president the intel that he would need, and maybe some of the counter intel, which she knew some of and didn't know others of, because there's also entire agencies that do nothing but counterintelligence. I'm not going to go into that. There are other agencies you've never even heard of. Now, there is an information war going on since the moment that technology came on the scene with Marconi. It's always under the auspices of war. It's always under the auspices of counterintelligence. So when you hear the name Arvinder Sambai, or you hear the name Allison Saunders, or Richard Dearlove, or Stephen Halper, or Joseph Mifsud, that's counterintelligence experts, worldwide experts. They are the treasonous people who set up the conspiracy to overthrow candidate Trump, Trump-elect, and President Trump. And they're still doing it to this very moment. It has not stopped. And to make it even more topical, look at Italy, where the Brits, Arvinder Sambai, sent George Papadopoulos to where? To Rome, to Link University campus. And what is that? That is a Western intelligence agency training center where the ex-spies of Italy, the ex-spies of Saudi Arabia, these are all CIA, what I call rogue CIA. These are all rogue intelligence from Britain, from Ukraine, you name it, they all go there. And what just happened? They just canned 6 of the top intelligence people in Italy for being directly connected to this frame-up of George Papadopoulos, which we know was directed from London, but Italy, I can't believe this, that a counterintelligence operation actually was made so public they had to fire 6 of their top people, 2 who led 2 of their agencies. But is that going to happen in Britain? No, because the Telegraph came out with 2 articles giving the alibi for the Privy Council and the Queen and all the people involved. We've named them all. Don't want to name them all again, but you know them all. You know, the Stephen Halpers, the Alexander Downers, the people who set up Papadopoulos. And then now we know that Sir Charles Farr, who was the head of the Joint Intelligence Committee, directed this. He was informed. MI6 was informed. MI5 was informed. Dearlove was informed.
Well, I'm actually, now you're talking about that, let me look. I'm looking at the actual minutes of the meeting on March 14th, 1946, where the FBI was admitted as a member of this little private club. And let me read you this. This is really interesting because they reference an oath. And the FBI representative that they wanted to bring into this private club, very secret, so secret that they couldn't even discuss with third parties the existence of the agreement that created this set of meetings. And the person they were bringing in was a FBI agent by the name of Simperman. And they discussed, they actually were having a problem with bringing in the FBI delegate Simperman. And one of the questions they asked was, the question was raised as to whether he be admitted as a voting member or an observer. And this represented the FBI. Whether maybe we should just make him an observer, and whether he had signed the ultra oath. It was finally agreed to allow him in. What's the ultra oath, Douglas? I have no idea. I can't find anything on it.
I don't know. I do know that used to be.
They're asking if somebody from the FBI has signed the ultra oath so they can let them into this club that's basically run by Sir, what's the guy's name? Sir Edward Travis, who, by the way, is one of the founders of GCHQ. Whether the FBI guy had signed the ultra oath. So there's other oaths going on in this country, have nothing to do with the U.S. Constitution, Douglas.
Well, I do know the following. If you say top secret or secret, there's a word after that, and that word is good for as long as it's valid. It could be good for 1 day, it could be good for 5 years. And a long time ago, I do know one of the passwords. I can say them now because they're no longer top secret, but top secret ultra, top secret umbra, top secret canute, top secret, all these different things.
Right.
It could be referring to that. Now, the FBI agent wouldn't have signed a military top secret ultra, or in my day, top secret umbra. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, they wouldn't sign these contracts if they were just FBI. They'd only sign them.
What did you just say? Because I think I've seen that. Umbra?
Umbra, the shadow.
I think that was a code name for Ultra, if I'm not mistaken. I've seen that somewhere.
Well, it was the top secret word for top secret documents for years. For all the years I was involved, it was the same. They didn't change it. I got to actually invent a couple of those words. But anyway, the point is that that person in the FBI didn't probably have a military top secret ultra contract or a top secret super contract. And so they had to make them sign it, because when you sign that, you say you're committing a crime and you're going to go to jail. You ahead of time agree that your sentence and that your plea is guilty.
Wait,
okay?
Isn't this called organized crime?
It's totally racketeering. You basically give up of your U.S. citizenship and you come under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, plus all the subsections that are not in there that relate to top secret and all your top secret clearances. I signed probably at least a dozen of them, different ones, because I got to be at the top where I got to stamp things for the president's eyes only. I wasn't supposed to read those documents, but shh, don't tell anybody. I read them. And, I got to experience the fact that my job working for the NSA was to provide the president with information, not opinions, and absolutely under no condition was I supposed to do anything about my surveillance or my intelligence that I provided to the president. Why? He decides. These counterintelligence group of the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, and the DOJ, they act independently. They are a rogue shadow government. We've explained this before many times. They are the bureaucratic status quo that never changes, that makes sure that all no-bid contracts go to the Brits, as well as nothing ever changes. And that's what the InfoWars are about. When it's NSA, it's called signals intelligence. When it's CIA, it's counterintelligence. It is a war against us. Not only a war against our enemy, because we don't even know that they are our enemy. Who says they're our enemy? Who says the intelligence that came in when Victoria Nuland supposedly got a call from Estonia saying that there was a video of a compromising material of Trump with prostitutes? That's a lie. Victoria Nuland needs to go to jail. She created counterintelligence. She did it on purpose. That wasn't intelligence. We know this for a fact. So all the counterintelligence, any counterintelligence in this country is a treasonous act if the president doesn't know about it. And there's a whole lot of that going on. And it happens in Lockheed Martin and L3. It happens in SAIC. It happens in the Highlands Forum. All these things you've talked about happens in the Naval Office of Intelligence.
The interesting thing about this particular meeting, not to interrupt you, but this meeting, in the NSA version of these minutes, the name of the chairman is blocked out. But in the British version of these minutes, that person's identified. It's Captain E.G. Edward Hastings. And Hastings, and then the top British person in this meeting, Sir Edward Travis, are both founders and leaders of GCHQ. So, and they're arguing whether the FBI should be let into this, by the way. That's what they're arguing here. And so, or whether maybe they should just be let in as an observer. So who's really running the world, Douglas?
Well, I'm about to tell you. Are you
okay,
ready?
Please.
Are you seated?
It certainly is not our president. These meetings are clear.
Well, the president doesn't take his intelligence anymore from those imbeciles, those 17 intelligence communities who all lied. President Trump gets his intelligence from intelligent people who are not counterintelligence, who are not propaganda, who are not yellow journalism. We could go into that, but I'm not going to. Here is
yellow journalism called Tavistock. These guys controlled Tavistock and still do.
And when you say war, you can't say war without saying propaganda. Not possible. Can't say war without saying bankers.
And it's brainwashing. It's those flicker rates they're controlling on these mobile devices to get the world public to do exactly what they want. This is just disgusting.
It's disgusting, but the deal is, we put out a lovely intelligence report on why all this happens, and this is why it happens. It happens because of money. As soon as you have money that goes from one nation to another, and you have commerce of any sort whatsoever, you're going to have spies. Sorry, because someone's going to want advantage by manipulating money. Now, money, to begin with, was called mammon. And some people believe it's a demon, it's a devil, and by its pathways you might think it is. But we can say literally this started in Samaria, where they said money is more important than humans. So if you owe somebody some money, we're going to allow that person who you owe money to lock you up in debtor's prison. And we're going to keep you in there making a little tiny bit of money, crushing rocks until the moment comes when you pay your debt off or die. And if you don't pay your debt off, they come after your mother, your brother, your sister, your wife.
Well, here we go, Douglas. And here they said the Treasury can't be involved. That's the U.S. Treasury can't be involved in this intelligence. But the Brits never said that. They never agreed to that. And here we have the Privy Council controlling the development of this new intelligence system. There you go. And they're controlling the money.
And the British did this through the British East India Company. They let them go out and be the warriors, the spies, the economic terrorists, really, quite literally, where they killed and maimed more people than you can count, and then they had corporate wars going on. But the British sat back in the Parliament, and they hid the fact that they were members, corporate members of the British East India Company. They let them do whatever they wanted. The British East India Company had a bigger navy, had a bigger army, was more powerful than Britain itself, but it was the British East India Company was controlled by Brits. Eventually, it was folded into the Parliament, folded into the government, and now has become the way that government works. It hasn't changed.
And Cecil Rhodes actually owned property formerly owned by the British East India Company.
And look at him. He goes to South America, and he takes over all the gold and diamonds there. What about the people who live there?
Africa.
I mean, South Africa. So he goes to Africa, to Rhodesia. They name a country after him. And in South Africa, and in basically, De Beers Diamonds was set up by him. The gold theft from the Transvaal, all one person, right. One Brit, one person.
Well, and De Beers was funded by N.M. Rothschild.
And why? Because they could control the propaganda. They controlled the newspapers. They controlled what even the Parliament heard as truth, as intelligence. Mm-hmm. Whoever controls the intelligence controls war, and whoever controls war controls commerce, because commerce became war the minute that it went from one country to the other and they started using coins or any kind of credit, which started in Samaria. And then that was passed down to the Jews. Now, I'm going to say something very cruel and very horrible here, but I'm talking about the Hebrews, the ancient Hebrews. The ancient Hebrews, what did they do? They stole Canaan, didn't they? And how did they steal it? With spies. And when they came out of the desert, it was spies they always sent ahead to where they were going. And it was spies who set things up and got things going, found out the information they need, and found out the weaknesses of the enemies. And so it was war and spies and taking things, money or property or wealth, whatever you want to say, that came to programs. Remember in the Old Testament it said that God told the Hebrews to knock down, of their enemies, to knock down the walls, to kill all the animals, the women, the children, and salt the ground. So the first pogroms, the first wars, the first absolute annihilation using intelligence and spies was developed by the ancient Hebrews. That was passed on to the Muslims, and as we know, to this very day, the Muslims believe that they must infiltrate all other cultures, and they are allowed to lie, to cheat, to do anything necessary, even kill, so that their religion comes to power. The same was true with the Christians and the Jesuits. The Jesuits went to Jerusalem. They learned this from the Muslims. They learned it from the Jews. They learned it from the Samaritans. And what did they do?
You're using terms very broadly here.
Very broadly.
You're not talking about all Christians. You're talking about the Jesuits.
Well, I said Christians, Jesuits. So I should have said
specifically
Jesuits. Because Ignatius Loyola was a soldier who got his leg blown off in the war. He went to Jerusalem, learned these...
Because, for example, the Orthodox Christians never bought into the Jesuit system.
Oh, no. And he created a militant system.
Or the Pope's control of the church. So you're talking about some really broad brush statements here. But if I could ask you to get back to the point about the control of intelligence, you're saying, and this is very interesting, and I'm paying attention here, that the control of intelligence is the control of mammon.
Yes, and the control of war. All war is lies. No truth is ever told in a war. Okay? So, St. Ignatius of Loyola learned all these horrible things from the Sumerians, the Jews, the Muslims, and brought it into Christianity, but a form of Christianity that I say isn't even Christian. And I know I was a Jesuit, and I entered as a double agent. I entered the Jesuits to bring spirituality to the Jesuits.
Can I ask you something about the orders within Roman Catholicism? Because I've had almost no contact that I know of with Jesuits, but I've had a lot of contact with Franciscans, Dominicans, and even people associated with Mother Teresa. So can you talk to that for a minute? Because I don't see in those people this penchant for money.
No, there's none of that. The other orders, almost all, except the secret orders, which I won't go into, Opus Dei and all that, P2 and all that. But the point is that all the good religious orders, they're beautiful, they're wonderful, no problem. The Jesuits, they were a militant order. Now, the Templars were a militant order, and they were spies, and they had codes, and they basically created banking in Europe. So unfortunately, out of the Catholic Church came banking to the Templars.
And they used encryption in their banking.
Oh, absolutely. They were the first check...
On the coin.
They wrote check writers that were encrypted. You could go from one of their conciliatories to the next and say... And they would look and they go, oh, on June the 23rd, you put this much money here, and so now you want some of it now. Okay, then I'm going to change your check and say I just gave you part of that, and I'm going to change it. You can carry that all the way to Jerusalem, and on the way you don't have to carry any gold with you. You can just stop at about every day ride once it was finished. The road to Jerusalem had a Templar conciliatory or a hospitaller group that basically became a city. And those were basically the banks. That was where the money was exchanged. And so the Templars became that. But Ignatius of Loyola took a vow, and his vow was to be the warrior for the Pope and to do anything the Pope needed. He was then called the Black Pope. And since then, there used to be an oath. The old oath, when you became a Jesuit, said that you could lie, cheat, subvert, infiltrate, kill, and you were pre-forgiven as long as you were doing it for the Black General, he's called, the Superior General Superior, the head of the Jesuit order. As long as you got the order. In other words, it's a jihad. The Jesuits were conducting jihad underneath the aegis of the Catholic Church through their Jesuit Superior General.
Well, we do know that Cecil Rhodes talked about his admiration for the Jesuit practices in the way the British were going to handle their governance going forward.
That's my point. It was built upon the Jesuit method. So did Hitler's SS. Himmler said that he worshipped the Jesuits and that their system was the best and the Catholic system was the ultimate system. Hitler said
isn't that interesting that in the admission of the FBI to this intelligence group, they actually pushed back and said, had he signed the Ultra Oath? Wow.
Because there is
so that's probably another Jesuit oath.
There's a penalty of death involved if there's treason, if you sign an oath that is the real oath. If you sign a military top-secret contract and you commit treason, you can be killed for it. And it depends on where you are at the time, whether it's a hanging, a shooting, or whatever. So the point is you can die now. Benito Mussolini said he built his entire system, his Secret Service system. The Carbonari was built upon the Jesuit model, as Hitler's model was built on. Everyone who was evil, you name it. You can't name anybody who didn't study the Jesuit system so that they could incorporate evil. Now, I'm going to tell you one more story, and I'm going to end this. And the point is, the Jesuits were masters at what? They didn't have weapons, but they started all the wars, and they ended wars. And they stopped wars, and they planned on wars, and they planned it all out. Now, this is what used
Wars
to be
were
said.
good for confiscating property.
Oh, yes. Look at what the Pope at Rome did. The Pope at Rome at one point was a general, had his own standing army, and he was going out killing people. And sometimes they'd say, but Pope, we don't know which are the Christians or which aren't. And he'd say, kill them all, God will know his own. That was what the Jesuits were working for. That is who the Jesuits were working for. Now,
well,
they
you know
used to
what?
say this story.
I have personal friendship with St. John Paul II, and I didn't see any of that ethic or morality in him at all.
He's not a Jesuit.
You're generalizing about popes, but I know one, and he wasn't like that.
He was a holy man, and they made him a saint. Unfortunately, the next two were as evil as any popes in history. Right. That's the problem. Now,
That's
they used
the
to tell
irony
the story. The story is great. The Pope used to do the following. When he wanted to go to war with a country, he would do the first thing he would do is he would call the person to muster his army, because that would take quite a long time. The second thing he'd do is he'd call the Jesuits, and he'd send in 2 Jesuits to that country, to wherever the king was. And the Jesuits would go in as spies, and they would take over the education of the king's children. And the story was that usually by the time the Pope and his army got to the gates of the city, the 2 Jesuits came out with the keys to the city, and that everyone inside had either been converted to Catholicism or they were in a Jesuit school being brainwashed to accept it as soon as the Pope got there. So the Pope oftentimes didn't have to go to war because 2 Jesuits went in as propagandists.
So that's what Cecil Rhodes admired about them. They were able to take over generally without war.
And as you know, I had something to do with Star Wars, and so the concept of 2 Jesuits or 2 Templars were built into the idea of the training of a Jedi warrior, so that there was always an older and a younger. That's the way the Jesuits did it. And it's a training factor that worked quite well. So there's a lineage, a direct lineage. So when we go back to the fact that what you're talking about are the historical roots where the InfoWars started, when technology started to be stolen and manipulated, and patents like yours and intellectual property like Leader Technologies is stolen for the sake of war, and then underneath the auspices of national security, you get away with anything, and underneath the auspices of counterintelligence, you don't even have to tell the president that you are targeting him and you're trying to bring him down. He doesn't even get informed, and then you have pigs like John Brennan and Clapper and Comey who have defied any military top-secret contract that they would have signed, which I assume they did not, and they should go to jail for treason for it, without any trial. When you commit treason and you're in the military, you go to jail first. You don't get a lawyer first.
I'm just blown away. I'm looking at the document that was released about 3 weeks before our Facebook trial. There was a sealed document that Facebook submitted to our judge about 2 days before the trial started. And this would have been about a month after these documents were released, where the world first learned about all of these secret agreements that Britain and America had engaged in, and including the Commonwealth, by the way. And I can see from later documents they let Canada in at some point, in New Zealand and Australia. But here I am looking at the document and asking, in deciding whether they even let the FBI in on the meeting, whether he had signed the ultra oath. I am quoting, whether he had signed the ultra oath. He must have, because they let him in. Sir Edward Travis let him in, the founder of GCHQ.
Wow.
Now, there we have the genesis of all of our problems.
And as you pointed out, all the inside group were military until they wanted to invite someone non-military in, and then that was a big deal to them. Well, guess what? The president does not have access to the black ops programs. I'm sorry that if this takes people as a shock. The president does not have access to a lot of stuff, and unless he specifically went there and asked, technically...
Well, that's got to change. He's got to have access to everything. That's got to change now.
Well, you can see that they don't even let him send out unredacted documents. He has the right, as the president, to determine anything that his agencies have created as intelligence, whether it should be shown to the people. And he's transparent, so basically everything should be shown to the people. So here, you want to end all of this nonsense? Make it all
transparent. Ought to
transparent.
go right to the core, the heart of this particular cabal.
So
we're looking at their documents here.
Let's put a vote out for the American people. Do you want an agency that lies, that cheats, that subverts, that infiltrates, that kills, that is nothing but deceit, that can actually overthrow your president? Would you like one of those? That's called the CIA. No. Everyone votes no. It no longer exists. Should there be a counterintelligence department in the FBI? Absolutely not. Ask anybody with an intelligent question whether they would want that. No one wants that. And so anybody who's in it, they're corrupt. Period. I'm sorry. I was in the NSA. I was corrupt when I was in the NSA. I was committing a crime. I admit it. And I'm fighting against it. Anyone who doesn't, they're guilty.
By engaging, by having anyone who was in the NSA, CIA, whatever, sign that secrecy agreement, you basically all agreed that you were committing. No wonder you're all silent. No wonder everybody that's been a part of this organization is silent and doesn't talk about it. They don't know what will happen to them.
In one single agreement, I would go to jail for one single speck of information if I even said the following, which is no longer. If I said RBE 007 Abel and Baker, if I said that out loud back in those days, I could be put in jail for more years, for the rest of my life, basically.
Well, what did you just say?
I gave you a secret code from another nation. But
RB, what is it?
Oh,
I'm
not going to repeat that. I could I could tell you exactly what it is.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So you're saying what you just said at the time would have sent you to jail?
Correct. For life, and a fine in the millions.
Wow.
Let alone if I would have said, I spied on Russia with electronic warfare. And if I named the island, let's say I named the very island that I did that from and what particular information center I spied on.
Well, all that's discussed in these documents, so that's obviously public knowledge now.
It is no longer classified, but there's a whole lot of it that isn't very well known. And some people know it because, yes, it does come out. But here's why it comes out, because honest people become whistleblowers, as they should. And if they don't, then they're black hats, and they're treasonous. So all you people in the CIA that don't come out, don't tell me that you're a good and honest person, Gina.
No red-blooded American can accept this.
No.
We cannot accept this. This is not a moral country that does this.
You accept the murder of Allen Dulles of the CIA, of John F. Kennedy, if you are in the CIA and you don't become a whistleblower. It's as simple as that. This is an information war. If you stand back, and, oh, by the way, if you stand back and you watch John Brennan do what he did, and I could just name things that you had to have observed if you ever walked in his office, and you didn't turn him in for treason, you are culpable for treason. If you witness treason and you don't turn it in and you're in the military, that's treason. If you have top secret security clearance and you don't turn it in, it's treason. And in many of the oaths people take throughout all the different agencies, if you don't turn people in for treason, it's treason. And so there was an idiot came out yesterday who said, well, you just don't know the definition of treason. No. Brett Kavanaugh defined the definition of treason. He said it can be prosecuted 3 ways in America. 1, a military tribunal. The other 2 are simply federal courts. And any citizen can be tried for treason. And then he defined treason.
We have evidence here that on March 14th of 1946, the FBI's Mr. Simperman committed treason because he, in effect, agreed that he had signed the Ultra Oath.
Well, what you've done today, again, is showed us the historical roots. You showed us how it's apropos in our daily news, and it showed really the genesis and the roots and basically the evil rat lines of the way that this stuff works. So we need to start using the word spy, treason, and using it properly and accusing the proper people so that A.G. Barr will make sure that he's got a very, very clear trail. And I can say that the Americans for Innovation crime line couldn't be a clearer trail to treason than anybody else could ever produce. So, A.G. Barr, if you haven't gone to Americans for Innovation and taken a look at the crime line, that's all you need. And it's so much better than the Russian dossier.